Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, Joe the Lawyer. Today, we're going to take a look at two of the cases that we've been following. Number one is the Nick Reiner case, where he's accused of murdering his parents, including Rob Reiner, the famous Hollywood producer. Also, we are going to take a look at the Luigi Mangione case. There have been some updates that I think are worth talking about. But first, let's start with Nick Reiner. Nick Reiner, almost childlike in jail after parents' alleged murders, Fox Nation documentary reveals. We're going to dive into this article, but one thing I forgot. First of all, if you enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Great way to support the show. Looking to grow the show. I would really appreciate some comments. I do truly appreciate the chat, but the comments help even more because they feed the algorithm. Thank you very much, Adam, for coming. Long time no see. I appreciate it. Also, raise your cup, your glass in the air. I've been drinking caffeine-free Diet Coke now because I'm 43 years old and I can't sleep on caffeine. So raise your cup, your glass in the air. Cheers with me. It tastes better when we cheers together. Cheers. Okay, so here we are. We're going to take a look at the Nick Reiner case first. Almost childlike in jail after parents' alleged murders, Fox Nation documentary reveals. A new TMZ Investigate special on Fox News claims Nick Reiner is in no mental state to stand trial for the alleged murders of his parents. Now, keep in mind, this is this is Fox Nation. Rob and Michelle Reiner, as the program reveals new details about his mental state, medication changes, and the action against him. You know what? Let me open this. Did they do they did a whole show on this? I don't really follow Fox Nation, so I don't know. They did like a video on this or something. So here's what it says. He is not competent to stand trial right now. He is almost childlike in jail, we are told. TMZ executive producer Harvey Levin told Fox and Friends on Monday. He can't process the consequences of what he's done. This is a TV producer, okay? TMZ executive producer. He knows what he did. He just can't understand where he is right now. And I know that sounds crazy, but he's out of his head right now. Doctors had changed Nick's medication a month before the murders due to his complaints of weight gain, and that adjustment messed Nick up, Levin said, explaining Nick was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which can cause delusions, hallucinations, and mood disorders. And those three elements right there, that's what you use to build an insanity defense. Levin described the alleged murders as incredibly brutal. We know people in the medical examiner's office who are traumatized just by the pictures. He claimed the killings had all the markings of a meth murder and that Nick had been using meth when he was off the rails after his medication switch up, adding that he was arrested in a drug den. It has the markings of somebody who was just wildly strong. We have not gotten the confirmation of that, but we've talked to people. If he were just Nick Reiner without something additional, the carnage wouldn't have been the way it was, Levin said. Jackson says Nick is not guilty. That's Alan Jackson, his attorney. What he's really saying is not guilty by reason of insanity, and I think that's going to be the plea in this case because there's no way he'll plead not guilty. So that's something that we didn't really discuss. He could, the only feasible defense, and I don't know all the evidence, but from what I've seen so far, the only feasible defense, I don't think Nick can really go with a I didn't do it defense. I think his best defense here is going to be insanity. So he could go to trial and risk that, right? Like go to trial and let the jury decide. And as I covered in prior videos, they'd have the battle of the experts. You'd have the state's expert, and then you'd have Nick's expert. And one expert would say he's insane, and the other one would say he wouldn't. But what happens when the experts agree? Well, if both experts agree, the state of California's expert and the expert that Nick Reiner has or retains, or the public defender retains on his behalf, then if the experts agree, there's really no point in having a trial, right? Like, his best bet probably is at that point to do a plea of not guilty, or I'm sorry, guilty but mentally insane. That can really only be done though if both parties agree to it. Okay, if they don't agree to it, he can be forced into a trial. And if that's the case, that means the Commonwealth is not buying the insanity defense. They don't buy it. They don't believe it. They have a doctor or an expert who's saying that this is simply not the case. And so if Nick is in that sort of mental state right now, it'd be interesting, and I'm sure we'll see this. Well, if it goes to trial, we'll see this. If it doesn't go to trial, we may not get all the details. But it'd be interesting to see if he's on the same medications that he was before he got crazy or in bad. If they put him on new medications, exactly how they're treating him. And maybe the trauma of the incident has also affected him mentally to a very large degree. And it's really hard to say. And obviously we don't have all the facts, but if he appears this way, then there's a very good chance he does guilty by reason of guilt, guilty but insane, which would put him into a mental hospital effectively for the rest of his life. And so that may be where this case is headed. This case may be heading to a plea. As long as the state of California is like that. Now, California's laws, I'd be interested to see it, or to look it up, like, because some people that if they're guilty but insane, they could be rehabilitated and then released at a later time. I don't know how common that is or what the law says in California. Maybe that's something that I'll look into. But it's possible this case could lose a lot of its juice. And I say that by saying that, it may not go to trial, if he's really, really that insane. And, with that said, sometimes a plea is the best resolution for all parties. So I just want to put that out there. It means the family doesn't have to go through the trauma of a trial, and frankly, neither does the defendant, where everything gets brought back up and restated and reiterated and argued over in an extremely public manner. So, there are interests of both sides of not going to trial on this case. So we'll just have to, this guy who's making these opinions. Harry Levin, he's a TMZ exec. He's a TV producer, I guess, or TMZ is a TV channel, I think. So I don't know if we can really take his word for things. Next, we're going to move over to some updates on the Luigi Mangione case. Adam, I've been good. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. Yeah, he absolutely is. He absolutely. He may be off his meds in the jail, and that might be reverting him to the childlike state. It's really, really difficult to say. But if his mental state is really kind of that fragile, I think it goes a long way to saying that he's got a really good insanity defense, essentially. But maybe a trial can be averted. He can plead guilty but insane, and he can go to a mental hospital, get the treatment he needs, also not be released, in order to protect society and give a sense of justice to the family. So now let's take a look at Luigi Mangione case. If stalking and assault aren't crimes of violence, the death penalty vanishes. Defense cites new liberal Ninth Circuit decision arguing stalking charge doesn't meet crime of violence threshold. Luigi Mangione's fate could hinge on a legal technicality, as his defense team argues that a recent federal court decision could potentially pull the rug out from under the Justice Department's murder charge. Well, if you read his article, you'll see that that's not the case. It's not going to pull the rug out from the charge, but it could take the death penalty off the table. And if the death penalty's off the table, he'd still go to jail, prison for the rest of his life if convicted. In the new filing, Mangione's lawyers cited the Ninth Circuit's January 13 decision in United States v. Gomez, which found that a California law on assault with a deadly weapon does not meet the crime of violence threshold due to legal technicalities. The panel found that armed assaults can be committed recklessly, meaning the defendant should have known the act carried a risk of danger, not just purposefully, meaning the defendant intended to harm the victim. In Mangione's case, the underlying alleged crime of violence is stalking. It's like a series of dominoes. The only way the federal government can get to a death penalty charge in their case is if the murder was committed during the course of a violent felony, said Josh Ritter, Los Angeles criminal defense attorney and Fox News contributor. And the reason they need that is because they need what's called a federal hook to get them federal jurisdiction. So the way they get that hook is through stalking. Mangione is accused of stalking United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson against state lines, then gunning him down outside a New York hotel hours before he was supposed to meet with company shareholders for a business conference. While in this case the alleged stalking did lead to violence, Ritter said the defense only needs to convince that court that the crime of stalking as a whole can sometimes be committed without violence in order for the legal argument to work. He's got a hell of a defense team, and they're making some very interesting arguments, he told Fox News Digital. The defense told the New York judge that the Gomez decision supports dismissing the murder charge because the underlying stalking allegation does not meet the definition of a crime of violence. The Ninth Circuit's en banc decision isn't binding in the Southern District of New York, where Mangione faces federal charges, said Donna Rotunno, a Chicago-based criminal defense attorney and Fox News contributor. This is a little more interesting. I'll explain. The defense will argue it doesn't matter that stalking doesn't necessarily mean it will lead to murder. Therefore, it should not be used to enhance the murder charge for purposes of federal court and the death penalty. Thompson, a 50-year-old father of two, lived in Minnesota. Video shows a gunman approach him from behind and open fire before fleeing the scene. Without an underlying violent crime, the federal murder charge that depends on it should be thrown out entirely, and the potential death penalty with it, according to Mangione's lawyers. According to the prosecution, the reason for the stalking was to allegedly carry out a politically motivated assassination. No other purpose, Rotunno said. That's an interesting picture. The Ninth Circuit has a reputation for being one of the country's most liberal federal appellate courts, and many of its decisions reach the Supreme Court, according to legal experts. The Gomez decision came down days after Mangione's lawyers and federal prosecutors squared off in court to deliver oral arguments on the issue. His team filed a supplemental brief hoping to add weight to their arguments. It's unclear how the judge will rule, but other legal experts are skeptical. They are the most liberal circuit court in the land. They also have the highest overturn rate out of all the circuits. The filing may be a stretch. The argument literally is backwards, he told Fox News. You don't stalk someone and say, oh, hey, I'm just having fun. You stalk someone with intent to harm. Mangione is due back in federal court on Friday. He also faces state-level charges in New York and Pennsylvania in connection with the case. So this is my Luigi Mangione judge summons Pennsylvania cop to court to testify on backpack search. So this is just the continuation of the suppression motion that we spoke about previously. But this is interesting because, you know, he's most murder charges. Let's start here. Most murder charges and cases are not done on a federal level in federal court. So, for instance, the most popular murder case of all time, the O.J. Simpson trial, is done in state court, California state court. A lot of other Casey Anthony murder trial was done in a Florida state court. This is what it appears to me has happened in this case, that the prosecution, the United States attorney filed this case in federal court so that they can seek the death penalty, so that they can get the death penalty, because filing this case in New York State court probably means that, I don't know, New York may not even have the death penalty, or they have the death penalty, but it will never be applied. So it appears to me, and I'll look a little more into this, but it appears to me the prosecution decided to file federally against Mangione in order to put the death penalty on the table. Because if they just did it in state court, they wouldn't have that option. However, a recent decision came down that has jammed that up. Essentially says, I'm not exactly sure, but in order for the case to stay federal, it has to have some sort of federal hook. And that has to include an additional charge of violence outside of the homicide. And what they're using is stalking. That's my interpretation of this issue. Here's where they go wrong, though. That last commentator says, well, stalking is always a crime of violence. In actuality, it is not. Because a person can be convicted of stalking without ever committing a single violent act. If you look at the definition of stalking in most states, we'll look it up real quick just in Pennsylvania, stalking under PA law. If you look at the definition of stalking, okay, a person commits the crime of stalking when the person engages in a course of conduct or repeatedly commits acts towards another person, including following the person without proper authority, under circumstances which demonstrate either an intent to place such person in reasonable fear of bodily injury or to cause substantial emotional distress to such other person. All right, well, I'll say that. This language here actually does make it look like it's a crime of violence. Number 2, engages in a course of conduct or repeatedly communicates to another person under circumstances which demonstrate or communicate either an intent to place such other person in reasonable fear of bodily injury or to cause substantial emotional distress to such other person. So in Mangione's case, it would be the first part. It would be or repeatedly communicates a course of conduct or repeatedly commits acts, including following the person without proper authority under circumstances which demonstrate intent to place such person in reasonable fear of bodily injury. Does the fear of placing someone in fear of bodily injury, is that a crime of violence? Placing someone into a situation of substantial emotional distress, is that a crime of violence? That, I imagine New York statute is similar to this, and I think that's a fair question. I really do. And the reason I don't know how that's treated under Pennsylvania law, but, stalking, like, I've dealt with a lot of stalking cases where nobody is ever actually harmed, right? Like a boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend who's upset about the breakup will drive to his girlfriend's place of work, sit outside, watch her when she comes in, go park his car outside of her house, watch her go into the house. That sort of thing is generally charged as stalking. But there's no physical assault that ever occurs. There's no act of violence which ever occurs. So I think it's an interesting question. I don't know how the law looks at it in Pennsylvania. I certainly don't know how it looks at it in New York. But, if that gun charge that they reference is not a crime of violence, okay, found that a California law on assault with a deadly weapon does not meet the crime of violence. If that doesn't meet a crime of violence, how could a stalking meet a crime of violence? Unless, they mention here recklessly. The panel found armed assaults can be committed recklessly, meaning the defendant should have known the act carried a risk of danger, meaning the defendant intended to harm the victim. how can assault with a deadly weapon not meet the crime of violence threshold, right? Like I'd have to really read this decision, because it just sounds wild. That just sounds like a wild conclusion to me. So, given the fact that the decision itself sounds outside of the bubble, and that stalking as an element includes the threat of reasonable fear of bodily injury, I would say that the prosecution is going to win this argument. But I didn't read the opinion. I don't know it deeply enough. I'd have to read all the relevant statutes and then the opinion too. So I'd say that this is a good argument to make by the defense, but my money is going to be that it fails. And even if it failed, all it would really do, it would mean they would have to refile the case against him in state court. They'd have to move his case to state homicide, which I believe they would do with all relative swiftness, and it wouldn't see him released from jail, but it would see him get out from under the death penalty, which would be a big deal for him and his defense team. If they can remove the risk of death, that's a pretty large victory in and of itself. So we'll continue to follow these developments. Just wanted to hop on for a quick stream tonight. For those of you watching right now, thank you for watching. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. I'm working on a graphic where we're going to keep track of basically the 8 biggest criminal cases in America, the ones that we decide or we are interested in, and I'm going to update those, make predictions. And the point of the show is part of it is, some people are, this is real life. Real people are hurt in these situations, okay? And we feel them. Our heart and prayers go out to them. But for some people, they're very interested in this, so they watch as a form of entertainment. But for me, a greater purpose and why I think you should watch me is to inform and educate, because I think it's important for the citizens of the United States to understand the criminal laws and how they work. And there's maybe no other way to do it. There's no better way to do it than to maybe follow these cases that are in the news. I mean, outside of going and sitting in a courtroom, okay, and observing day after day after day, which 95% of people don't have the time to do, the luxury of doing that. If you can follow these live court cases, and then you can watch my channel in order to get commentary, which breaks it down for you, helps you understand it on a better level. So we're going to teach the law, teach about the justice system through these court cases. These court cases are going to be our vehicle. But just one more point on this Mangione case and what I just said is federal cases, most criminal cases are dealt with under the state law. And you do need a federal hook in order for the federal courts to get involved. So, for instance, if you think of the 8 alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, they're generally dealing with organized crime, organized drug rackets, organized prostitution, human trafficking that crosses state lines. So that's your classic federal hook, right? Is a crime that crosses state lines means the FBI, ATF, DEA can jump in, okay, and they can prosecute those crimes because it involves 2 states or more. It makes it a federal thing, not just a single state, right? Then you have certain federal statutes, okay? And again, you're normally talking about large, like a lot of federal cases we get in like Pittsburgh, Western District of PA, are cases that are just, again, these large drug rings, okay? Or these are just cases I've dealt with, or we had individuals moving, like human trafficking across state lines, or across country lines, different nations, right? That is when that is when federal courts really get involved in state in criminal prosecutions. But they can get involved in cases like this if there is a federal hook. And sometimes there are certain crimes that are just written into the federal statutes that can create a hook, even if the crime didn't necessarily cross state lines. I would say this: I don't, Mangione moved through Pennsylvania, and then it's not your classic drug trafficking type of case, though, right? But he did cross state lines in order to commit the crime. I don't know if that's part of the hook here or not. Again, they're using it. It sounds to me like there's a statutory hook. There's a statutory hook to take this case into federal court, and that is, that homicides can be brought in federal court if they were committed along with an additional crime of violence. Which it could be anything from like a rape to like a robbery, right? Like stick them up. So I'm going to look into that a little bit more. One of the reasons I don't know that is because I don't do federal criminal defense, at least not right now. I just primarily do state criminal defense. And again, the vast majority of criminal cases are in state court. But I know there are specific laws that create like a statutory hook to bring something into federal court. And then you have issues that cross state lines or cross the lines between different nations, right? Like cartels trafficking into America that will make a case primarily federal. One thing to know, though, is the federal criminal penalties are generally much worse than state. Even in a homicide, you can see here, I mean, they're bringing it in federal court because they want to hit him with the death penalty, which they won't achieve on a state basis. Now, for murder, he'll still get life in prison in the state of New York. But for some other crimes, like drug trafficking, for example, if it's on a state level, you might get a couple of years in jail. If you get indicted in federal court, you're looking at a decade easily. So federal court is much rougher generally than your state court. Hey, Brooke, coming in. Thank you very much. I was working close to Sarah. I've had a case with someone on federal probation in Pennsylvania. I could watch the entire trafficking routes. Yeah, that's your standard federal criminal case, although there are a lot of different ones. But I think what can happen is the federal laws will have certain, like they said, certain hooks that will have, there'll be crimes where they can bring it in federal court or state court. And that appears to be the case here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. My name is Joe Palmetto, Joe the Lawyer. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. I appreciate all the support. I appreciate everybody coming in. I will be back this weekend, but not tomorrow night. All right. Have a great day. Thank you very much.